In the stillness of the night, when the world grows quiet, the past begins to whisper. Stories of lives lost, secrets buried, and truths that refuse to stay silent. Welcome to Shadows of the Past, where we unravel true crime tales that linger like shadows in the mind. Tonight, in Volume 2, we delve into stories of betrayal, obsession, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Settle in, let the darkness surround you, and listen closely. The truth is often more haunting than the night itself. Chapter 1, The Vanishing of Katie Poirier. It was May 26, 1999, in Moose Lake, Minnesota, a town so small the night seemed to hold its breath. At a convenience store along Highway 35, 19-year-old Katie Poirier was working the late shift, her smile a beacon in the fluorescent glow. Katie was a dreamer. A law student with a voice that carried melodies, a heart that rescued stray animals, and a future she was building with her fiancé, Mark. But that night, something sinister lingered in the shadows, watching. By midnight, Katie was gone, and the mystery of her disappearance would shatter a town and haunt a nation. Katie Elizabeth Poirier was a light in every sense. Her blonde hair framed a face that radiated warmth, her laughter a comfort to weary travelers. She was a singer, pouring her soul into every note, a volunteer who nursed abandoned animals, a young woman balancing college with a part-time job to save for her wedding. Moose Lake, with its 2,000 souls, adored her. To her parents, she was their pride. To Mark, she was his world. He'd moved to town with him, their apartment a canvas for dreams of a life together. The gas station job was temporary, a means to an end, a place where her kindness greeted late-night customers. But on that night, the ordinary turned deadly. The store was a familiar hub, a stop for locals grabbing snacks or gas. Katie knew the routine: restock shelves, ring up purchases, chat with regulars. Around 11:30 p.m., a man entered. The surveillance camera, its grainy lens a relic of the 1990s, caught his silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, his movements deliberate. He lingered near the counter, his eyes fixed on Katie. To her, he was just another customer. To him, she was prey. Minutes later, a regular walked in and froze. The store was empty. The register sat untouched. The lights buzzed, but Katie was gone. Her purse lay on the counter, her keys beside it, her car parked outside. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was stolen. This wasn't a runaway. Katie had no reason to flee. Something had taken her into the night. The customer's call to the police was frantic. Moose Lake wasn't a place for crime, and the urgency was palpable. Officers arrived, their flashlights cutting through the dark. The scene was eerily normal except for Katie's absence. Her belongings screamed she hadn't left willingly. The surveillance footage was their only lead, and what it showed chilled them to the core. The tape was grainy, the images distorted, but the horror was clear. The man grabbed Katie by the hair, dragging her toward the door. Her body twisted in resistance, her hands clawing at his grip, but he was stronger. A glint of metal, a knife, perhaps a gun, silenced her fight. The footage ended as they vanished into the night, leaving a ghost on the screen and a town in panic. Word of Katie's disappearance spread like wildfire. By dawn, Moose Lake was awake, its streets buzzing with fear and resolve. Volunteers combed the woods, fields, and back roads, calling her name. Katie's family arrived, their faces pale, their hope fragile. Posters went up her smiling face on every lamppost. The community rallied, but fear crept in. If this could happen to Katie, bright, beloved Katie, who was safe? Investigators fixated on the surveillance tape. The image quality was poor, a cruel barrier to the truth. They sent the footage to NASA, where specialists used advanced software to sharpen the blur. Slowly, a face emerged, angular, weathered, with eyes that seemed to pierce the screen. It wasn't clear, but it was enough to fuel the hunt. The tape became their obsession, each frame a plea for answers. Days passed, then a week. The search widened. Helicopters over pines, divers in lakes. Tips flooded in, sightings, hunches, dead ends. Katie's parents spoke to the press, their voices breaking as they begged for her return. Mark stood beside them, his eyes hollow, clutching the ring he'd given her. Vigils lit up the night, candles flickering in the Minnesota wind, but the investigation's silence was deafening. Then, a breakthrough. A local woman, Melinda, came forward. She'd been near the gas station that night and saw a man in a black Ford F-150 pickup, his speed erratic, his demeanor uneasy. She'd caught a partial license plate, a detail scrawled on a napkin. It was a lifeline. Police cross-referenced the plate, narrowing the list until a name surfaced. Donald Allen Blom. Blom was a name that sent shivers through the precinct. At 50, he was no stranger to the law. His record was a descent into darkness. Burglary, assault, kidnapping, sexual violence. He was a drifter, his charm a mask for the predator within. His truck matched Melinda's description, down to the mud-caked tires. More troubling, he'd shaved his beard and cut his hair, as if erasing himself. But the past doesn't let go so easily. Police descended on Blom's property, a secluded plot outside Moose Lake. The air was tense as they approached. Blom was there, his eyes narrowing at the badges. He was calm, too calm, his answers rehearsed. The search began, methodical and unrelenting. In a shed they found the F-150, its interior reeking of bleach. Near a fire pit, they saw ashes. Too many, too deliberate, as if hiding something more than wood. Forensic teams sifted the ash, their hands trembling. They found fragments of bone, charred but human. Among them was a single tooth, its enamel scorched, a metal filling glinting. It was an unusual filling, one that didn't belong in just any mouth. Investigators contacted Katie's dentist, their voices tight, the x-rays were pulled, the match exact. The tooth was Katie's, a silent witness to her fate. Blom was arrested, his denials sharp. He claimed he'd been nowhere near the store, that the truck was a coincidence, that the ashes were from a bonfire, but the evidence was mounting and the pressure was relentless. In interrogation, his facade cracked. He confessed, his voice low, chilling. He'd taken Katie, driven her to his property, and killed her. He'd strangled her, burned her body to erase his crime, scattering the ashes. Later he recanted, but the damage was done. The tooth, the truck, the footage. It all pointed to him. The trial was a spectacle, a small town facing a monster. Prosecutors presented the forensic evidence, the enhanced video, Melinda's testimony. The tooth was the centerpiece. A fragment of truth in a sea of lies. Blom's defense argued coercion and mental instability, but the jury saw through it. In 2000, Donald Allen Blom was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. He died in prison in 2023, taking any final secrets to his grave. Katie's loss left a scar on Moose Lake. Her family grieved, a future stolen, her laughter silenced. The gas station, once a community hub, became a reminder of vulnerability. Her case sparked debates about workplace safety, about the dangers of working alone at night. Documentaries like Forensic Files immortalized her story, ensuring her name endured. But Katie was more than a case. She was a daughter, a fiancée, a dreamer whose light was extinguished too soon. Her story lingers, a reminder that even in quiet places, darkness can wait. Yet so can justice, relentless, searching for truth in the ashes. Chapter 2, The Ritual of Zoe Saraki. It was May 25, 2009, in Portland, Maine, a city where the scent of the Atlantic clung to the air and the nights carried a quiet charm. In a modest apartment on the edge of town, 18-year-old Zoe Saraki was spending the evening with her boyfriend, Chad Gurney. Zoe was a young woman full of promise, her laughter a melody that brightened even the gloomiest days. But beneath the surface of their relationship, something dark was simmering. That night, a confession would ignite a spark of jealousy, and by morning, Zoe's life would be extinguished in a horrifying act of betrayal, a crime so grotesque it would be called a ritual of vengeance. Zoe Saraki was a breath of fresh air in a world that often felt heavy. At 18, she was finding her place, her dark hair framing a face that held both innocence and determination. She was a dreamer, passionate about art and music, with plans to enroll in community college and carve out a life of her own. She'd grown up in Portland, her family a tight-knit circle of love and support. Her parents adored her, her younger brother looked up to her, and her friends cherished her infectious energy. Zoe was the kind of person who made you feel seen, her kindness a quiet strength. But like many young women, she was navigating the complexities of love, and in Chad Gurney, she thought she'd found someone who understood her. Chad was 30, a man whose charm masked a troubled soul. He was tall with a disarming smile that drew people in, but his eyes carried a weight that hinted at something darker. He'd struggled with depression for years, his mental health a fragile thread that often snapped under pressure. He had a history of fixation, particularly on younger women, a pattern that worried those who knew him. To Zoe, though, he was a protector, someone who listened when she spoke, who shared her dreams of a future together. Their relationship, though, was turbulent, marked by Chad's possessiveness and Zoe's growing need for independence. On that May evening, the tension between them was a storm waiting to break. The apartment was small, cluttered with the trappings of young love. Posters on the walls, a couch strewn with blankets, the faint hum of a television in the background. Zoe and Chad were alone, the night stretching before them. They'd been drinking, the alcohol loosening their tongues, and Zoe, in a moment of honesty, confessed something that would change everything. She'd been unfaithful, a fleeting mistake born of doubt and youth. She spoke with remorse, hoping for forgiveness, for a chance to move forward. But to Chad, her words were a betrayal, a wound that cut deeper than he could bear. His face darkened, his voice grew quiet, and in that silence, a plan began to form. What happened next was a descent into horror. Chad's anger erupted not in shouts, but in a chilling calm. He grabbed Zoe, his hands closing around her throat. She fought, her nails clawing at his arms, her gasp swallowed by the apartment's walls. But Chad was stronger, his rage unrelenting. He strangled her, watching the light fade from her eyes. In that moment, Zoe Saraki, with all her dreams and light, was gone. But Chad's crime didn't end there. What followed was an act so depraved it would shock even the most seasoned investigators. In the hours that followed, Chad's actions took a macabre turn. He violated Zoe's body, a necrophilic act that spoke to a mind unhinged. Then, as if driven by some twisted logic, he decapitated her, separating her head from her body in a gruesome ritual. He later told police it was a ritual of forgiveness, a way to reclaim her, to punish her for her betrayal. But he wasn't done. To erase his crime, he doused the apartment in gasoline, set it ablaze, and fled into the night. The fire roared, consuming the evidence, or so he thought. But the truth has a way of surviving even the fiercest flames. The fire department arrived just before dawn, alerted by neighbors who saw smoke curling from the building. The apartment was an inferno. The walls blackened, the air thick with ash. Firefighters battled the blaze, their hearts sinking as they discovered a body, or what was left of it. The remains were charred beyond recognition, the head missing, the scene a nightmare etched in soot. Police were called, their boots crunching on debris as they surveyed the wreckage. This was no accident, this was murder, and the hunt for answers began. Investigators faced a daunting task. The fire had destroyed much of the evidence, leaving fragments of a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. The body was Zoe's, they suspected, but identification was a challenge. Her family, frantic with worry after she failed to answer calls, provided dental records. Among the ashes, forensic experts found a single tooth, its filling a unique marker. It matched Zoe's records, a heartbreaking confirmation of her fate. The tooth became the cornerstone of the case, a silent witness to the horror that had unfolded. The investigation turned to Chad Gurney. He was the last person seen with Zoe, his apartment the scene of the crime. Police found him at a friend's house, his demeanor oddly detached, his clothes reeking of gasoline. He claimed he'd been out drinking, that he'd returned to find the apartment in flames, that Zoe must have been caught in an accident. But his story unraveled quickly. Witnesses placed him at the scene before the fire, his truck spotted leaving the complex. The gasoline on his clothes was a damning clue, and his shifting alibis only deepened suspicion. In a 127-minute interrogation, detectives pressed Chad, their voices calm but relentless. The room was stark, the air heavy with tension. Chad fidgeted, his eyes darting, his story crumbling. Finally, he broke. In a voice devoid of emotion, he confessed. He'd killed Zoe, he said, because she'd betrayed him. He described the strangulation, the necrophilia, the decapitation, calling it a ritual to forgive her, to make her his again. He'd set the fire to hide his crime, believing the flames would erase his sins. The confession was chilling, a window into a mind consumed by obsession and control. Later, he tried to retract it, claiming coercion, but the damage was done. The evidence mounted, the tooth, the gasoline, the witness testimonies. They painted a picture of guilt. Then came a bombshell. A leaked video of the interrogation surfaced online, its grainy footage spreading across forums and news outlets. The public was horrified, the details of Chad's ritual fueling outrage. Zoe's family, already shattered, faced the added pain of their daughter's death becoming a spectacle. The leak complicated the case, but it didn't change the truth. Chad Gurney was a murderer, and justice was coming. The trial began in 2011, a somber affair in a city still reeling. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case, the tooth at its heart. They played the interrogation tape, Chad's voice echoing in the courtroom, his words a confession of monstrosity. Witnesses testified to his possessiveness, his fixation on Zoe, his erratic behavior after the fire. Forensic experts detailed the fire's origin, the gasoline spread, the body's condition. The defense argued mental instability, claiming Chad's depression and alcohol use clouded his judgment, but the jury saw through it. In 2012, Chad Gurney was convicted of first-degree murder and arson. He was sentenced to 50 years for murder and 25 years for arson to be served consecutively. At 33, his life was over, confined to a cell where his rituals held no power. Zoe's family sat through every day of the trial, their grief a quiet force. Her mother clutched a photo of Zoe. Her father stared at Chad with eyes that held both sorrow and rage. They spoke of their daughter, of her art, her laughter, her dreams of a future that would never come. The community mourned with them, leaving flowers at the site of the burned apartment, a makeshift memorial to a life stolen too soon. The case left a scar on Portland, a reminder that even in a city of charm, darkness could take root. The story of Zoe Saraki is a haunting one, not just for its brutality, but for the questions it raises. What drives a man to turn love into possession, to see betrayal as a justification for horror? Chad Gurney called his crime a ritual, but it was no act of forgiveness. It was a theft, a violation of a young woman's light. Zoe's tooth, found in the ashes, became her voice, speaking when she could not. Her family carries her memory, a flame that no fire could extinguish. As the night deepens, her story lingers, a reminder that even in our closest bonds, shadows can hide the unthinkable. But so too can truth, relentless, rising from the ashes to demand justice. Chapter 3, The Burning Truth of Annie Tayan. It was November 6, 1989, in a quiet corner of South Carolina, where the air carried the weight of autumn and the highways stretched into the dusk. Annie Tayan, a 24-year-old single mother, was planning a new chapter, one free from the shadows of her past. She was vibrant, a woman who poured her heart into raising her two young children, her dreams tethered to their future. But that night, Annie vanished, her life snuffed out in a brutal act of control. A naval bag ablaze on a lonely highway would hold the first clue, a clue that would lie dormant for years until a friend's persistence and a wife's confession uncovered a monster hiding in plain sight. Annie Tayan was a woman who carried light despite her burdens. At 24, she was a devoted mother to her son and daughter, their laughter the rhythm of her days. Her dark hair framed a face that held both resilience and hope, her smile a quiet defiance against hardship. She worked long hours at a local diner, her wages stretched thin to provide for her children. Annie had grown up in South Carolina, her family a distant but loving presence, her friends a lifeline in tough times. She was determined to build a better life, to give her kids the stability she'd fought for. But love had been a complicated path, and in Michael Palin, she thought she'd found a partner until his true nature began to surface. Michael Palin was 27, a Navy petty officer stationed at a nearby base. He was handsome, with a disciplined air that drew Annie in, his stories of service painting him as a man of honor. But beneath the uniform was a controlling streak, a temper that flared when challenged. Michael had a history of volatile relationships, his charm a mask for possessiveness. To Annie, he was a chance at stability, someone who promised to share her burden. The relationship, though, was a tightrope, balanced between his affection and his need for dominance. By November 1989, Annie had had enough. She confided in friends that she planned to leave Michael, to take her children and start anew. It was a decision that would cost her everything. That evening, Annie was at home, a small rental house where she and her children lived. Michael was there, their conversation tense, the air thick with unspoken conflict. Annie's decision to leave hung between them, a challenge to Michael's control. What happened next was a descent into violence. Michael, enraged by her defiance, grabbed a crowbar, a tool lying nearby. He struck her, the blows relentless, shattering her skull into fragments. Annie's life ended in a moment of brutal fury, her body crumpling to the floor. Her children mercifully were with a babysitter, spared from witnessing the horror. But Michael's crime was only beginning. In a calculated move, Michael decided to erase his actions. He wrapped Annie's body in a naval bag, a heavy canvas sack from his time in the service. He drove to a remote stretch of highway, the night swallowing his movements. There, he doused the bag with gasoline and set it ablaze, the flames licking at the darkness. He believed the fire would consume the evidence, leaving no trace of his crime. But fire, like truth, is unpredictable, and the bag smoldered rather than burned completely. By morning, a passing driver spotted the charred remains, a grim discovery. On the roadside, the police were called, and the mystery of Annie Tayan began. The scene was horrific. The naval bag, partially burned, held a body so damaged that identification was nearly impossible. The skull was shattered, broken into 124 pieces, a testament to the violence inflicted. Police suspected it was Annie, reported missing by her friends when she failed to pick up her children. Her dental records confirmed the worst, a heartbreaking truth for her family. The naval bag was a clue, its military origin pointing to someone with access to such equipment, but in 1989, forensic technology was limited and the trail went cold. The case was shelved. Annie's children left with their grandparents, her killer free. For 4 years, Annie's case gathered dust, a file in a precinct drawer. Her friends refused to let her fade, holding vigils, pressing police for answers. One friend, Sarah, was relentless, her calls a constant reminder of Annie's unavenged death. In 1993, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, took interest, spurred by Sarah's persistence and the naval bag's connection. They reopened the case, their investigators combing through old leads with fresh eyes. Michael Palin, Annie's partner at the time of her death, was an early suspect, but he'd moved on, remarried, his life seemingly untouched. The key to unlocking the case lay with his new wife, Dawn Breeze. Dawn was 25, a quiet woman who had married Michael in 1991. Their marriage was strained, marked by Michael's controlling nature and Dawn's growing unease. In 1995, Dawn reached a breaking point. She contacted NCIS, her voice trembling as she revealed a secret she'd carried for years. Michael had confessed to her, she said in a moment of drunken candor. He'd killed Annie, striking her with a crowbar, burning her body to hide the... Dawn had helped cover it up, cleaning blood from their home, disposing of evidence. Her fear of Michael silencing her until now, her confession was a bombshell, a crack in the case that had seemed impenetrable. NCIS moved quickly. They searched the house where Annie died, long since abandoned. Using luminol, they found traces of blood on an old television, invisible to the naked eye but glowing under the chemical's light. The blood was Annie's, a silent accusation preserved through time. Dawn's testimony was corroborated by other evidence. Michael's access to naval bags, his history of abuse, his presence at the house that night. Confronted with a mounting case, Michael's defiance crumbled. In 1995, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, avoiding the death penalty in exchange for a life sentence. Dawn, granted immunity for her cooperation, faced no charges, her role as an accomplice overshadowed by her courage to speak. The trial was a quiet affair, the courtroom heavy with the weight of delayed justice. Annie's family attended, their grief tempered by relief. Her parents spoke of their daughter, of her love for her children, her dreams of a better life. Her children, now in their teens, listened in silence, their lives forever altered by a man they'd once called family. The judge sentenced Michael to life, but in a twist that stunned many, he was paroled in 2013 after serving 17 years. His release sparked outrage, a bitter reminder that justice can be fleeting. Michael faded into obscurity, his whereabouts unknown, while Annie's memory endured. The investigation had been a marathon, a testament to persistence. Sarah's advocacy, Dawn's confession, and NCIS's diligence brought Annie's killer to account, but the cost was immense. The forensic breakthrough, the blood on the television, was a stroke of luck, a reminder of how fragile the path to justice can be. Annie's children grew up without her, their lives shaped by loss. Her parents carried her memory, their love, a quiet rebellion against the violence that took her. South Carolina, a place of quiet beauty, bore the scar of her story, a cautionary tale of love turned deadly. Annie Tayan's case is a haunting reflection on the shadows cast by control. Michael Palin saw Annie's independence as a threat, her decision to leave a challenge he couldn't accept. His violence was not a moment of passion, but a calculated act. His attempt to erase her, a final assertion of power. Yet Annie's story is also one of resilience, of friends who refused to forget, of a woman who, even in death, demanded justice. The blood on the television, the naval bag, the confession, they were fragments of a truth that refused to burn away. As the night wraps around us, Annie's memory lingers, a reminder that even in the darkest acts, the light of truth can find a way. But at what cost? And for whom does justice truly serve? Chapter 4, The Millionaire's Fatal Mistake. It was June 27, 2011, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where the sun gilded the mansions and the air hummed with the promise of wealth. In a sprawling estate by the waterfront, 70-year-old Ronald Vinci lived a life most could only dream of, a millionaire whose flamboyance matched his fortune. But behind the polished doors, a storm was brewing. Ronald's partner, Catherine Pelly, a 54-year-old former flight attendant, carried a secret burden, one that would erupt in a night of unimaginable violence. A body wrapped in plastic, coffee grounds scattered to mask the truth. Ronald's wealth couldn't save him from Catherine's desperation, and his fatal mistake would unravel a tale of love, fear, and betrayal. Ronald Vinci was a man who lived loudly. At 70, he was a retired entrepreneur, his fortune built on real estate and savvy investments. His silver hair and tailored suits were a fixture in Fort Lauderdale's elite circles, his parties legendary for their extravagance. Ronald was charismatic, a storyteller who drew people into his orbit, his laughter echoing through his marble-floored mansion. He collected art, vintage cars, and admirers, his life a testament to... But beneath the charm was a controlling streak, a need to dictate the lives of those closest to him. To his friends, he was a generous eccentric. To Catherine, he was both a lifeline and a cage. Catherine Pelly was 54, a woman whose beauty had softened with time, but whose eyes held a quiet intensity. She had once been a flight attendant, her life a whirlwind of travel and glamour, but a series of setbacks, divorce, financial struggles had left her adrift. She met Ronald a decade earlier, drawn to his confidence and the security his wealth promised. Catherine moved into his mansion, becoming his partner, his confidant, his shadow. Their relationship was complex, marked by Ronald's lavish gifts and domineering nature. Catherine depended on him financially, her identity tied to his world. But the cost was her freedom. Friends noticed her growing unease, her laughter rarer, her spirit dimmed. The mansion was a gilded prison, its walls lined with art, its rooms filled with tension. Ronald and Catherine's relationship had deteriorated, their arguments a constant undercurrent. Ronald's controlling behavior, monitoring Catherine's spending, dictating her social life, clashed with her need for independence. She later claimed he was abusive, his temper flaring behind closed doors, though no police reports ever documented such claims. On June 27th, the tension reached a breaking point. What happened that night would shock a city accustomed to scandal, revealing the darkness that wealth could not conceal. The evening began quietly, the mansion's lights casting long shadows across the lawn. Ronald and Catherine were alone, their conversation strained. An argument erupted, its details murky, but Catherine later said it was about money, about her future, about her fear of being cast out. Ronald, she claimed, lunged at her, his anger a threat she couldn't ignore. What followed was a blur of violence, a moment that would change everything. Catherine grabbed a gun, a .38 revolver Ronald kept in a drawer. She fired, the shot striking him in the chest. Ronald fell, his body hitting the floor, but Catherine's panic didn't end there. In a frenzy, she acted to erase her crime. She stabbed Ronald's body, the knife plunging into his chest, as if to ensure he was gone. She bludgeoned him with a heavy object, the blows leaving his face unrecognizable. The violence was excessive, a release of years of pent-up fear, or perhaps something colder. Catherine's next move was calculated. She wrapped Ronald's body in plastic sheeting, securing it with duct tape. To mask the smell of decomposition, she scattered coffee grounds over the bundle, a desperate attempt to buy time. She dragged the body to a garage, her strength fueled by adrenaline, and began to plan. Catherine's plan was audacious. She purchased a large storage container from a hardware store, her demeanor calm as she paid in cash. She enlisted the help of Ronald's gardener, a man unaware of the container's grim purpose, claiming it was for household items. Together, they loaded the container onto a trailer, Catherine intending to dump it in a remote location, but her composure was cracking. She drove erratically, her mind racing, her actions drawing attention. A neighbor, suspicious of the late-night activity, noted the trailer and called police, a small act that would unravel her scheme. Fort Lauderdale police received the tip on June 28, their curiosity piqued by the neighbor's report. They arrived at the mansion, its grandeur a stark contrast to the horror within. Catherine answered the door, her face pale, her story rehearsed. She claimed Ronald was out of town, a business trip, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Officers noticed the trailer, the container still loaded, and asked to search. Catherine hesitated, her voice faltering, but she couldn't refuse. The container was opened, and the smell hit them first. A sickly sweetness no coffee grounds could mask. Inside was Ronald's body, wrapped in plastic, the truth laid bare. Catherine was arrested, her denials crumbling under questioning. In a tearful confession, she claimed self-defense, saying Ronald had attacked her, that she'd shot him in fear. The stabbing and bludgeoning, she said, happened in a panic, her mind clouded by terror. She admitted to the cover-up, her attempt to dispose of the body, a desperate bid to escape. But her story raised questions. The extent of the violence, the meticulous planning, did it speak to fear or to premeditation? Investigators leaned toward the latter, their case built on evidence that told a different tale. The mansion became a crime scene, its opulence overshadowed by forensic teams. Blood spatter on the walls, the gun with Catherine's fingerprints, the knife and blunt object nearby, they painted a picture of calculated rage. Surveillance footage from the hardware store showed Catherine buying the container, her face composed, no sign of panic. Receipts, phone records, and the gardener's testimony confirmed her actions after the killing. The coffee grounds, a detail both bizarre and chilling, suggested a mind aware of consequences, planning to evade them. The evidence was overwhelming, a web tightening around Catherine's claims. The trial began in 2013, a spectacle in a city where wealth and scandal were old friends. Prosecutors argued premeditation, pointing to the multiple methods of killing, shooting, stabbing, bludgeoning, as evidence of intent. The container, the coffee grounds, the trailer. They showed a woman covering her tracks, not fleeing in fear. Catherine's defense leaned on her claims of abuse, painting Ronald as a tyrant whose threats pushed her to the edge. She took the stand, her voice soft, her tears genuine, but the jury saw inconsistencies. No witnesses corroborated her abuse claims, no records showed prior complaints. In 2014, Catherine Pelly was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years. Her life now confined to a cell, far from the mansion's glamour. Ronald's death sent ripples through Fort Lauderdale. His friends mourned a man larger than life, their memories of his generosity tainted by the violence of his end. His family, distant but devastated, struggled with the loss of a patriarch whose flaws were overshadowed by his charisma. Catherine's family stood by her, insisting she was a victim driven to desperation, but the public saw a different story. A woman who traded love for security, only to destroy it when the cost became too high. The mansion was sold, its new owners whispering of a chill in its halls, a reminder of the tragedy within. The story of Ronald Vinci and Catherine Pelly is a stark reminder that wealth is no shield against darkness. Ronald's need for control, his belief that money could buy loyalty, was his fatal mistake. Catherine's dependence, her fear of losing the life she'd built, turned her into someone capable of unthinkable acts. The coffee grounds, the plastic sheeting, the container, they were not just tools of concealment, but symbols of a relationship eroded by power and resentment. Ronald's death was a tragedy, but so too was Catherine's fall. A woman who once soared above the clouds, now grounded by her choices. As the night deepens, their story lingers, a cautionary tale of what happens when love becomes a transaction and trust a luxury neither could afford. Chapter 5, The Conman Called Dirty John. It was August 2014 in Newport Beach, California, where the ocean breeze carried the scent of wealth and the penthouses gleamed under the sun. Deborah Newell, a 59-year-old interior designer, was a woman who built a life of success, her heart open to love despite past betrayals. That summer, she met John Meehan, a charming anesthesiologist who promised her the world. But John was no doctor. He was a predator, a con man whose lies wove a web of deception. By 2016, his true nature would unravel in a deadly confrontation, leaving a family fractured and a question unanswered. How far will love blind us to the danger within? Deborah Newell was a force of resilience. At 59, she was the founder of a thriving interior design firm, her elegance matched by her warmth. Her blonde hair framed a face that radiated kindness, her smile a testament to a life of hard-won triumphs. Deborah had raised 4 children, her daughters Jacqueline and Tara central to her world. She'd endured 4 failed marriages, each leaving scars but not dimming her hope for love. Newport Beach was her haven, its luxury a backdrop to her success, but her heart yearned for a partner to share it. When she met John Meehan online, his charm seemed like the answer to her prayers. John Meehan was 55, a man whose rugged good looks and easy confidence drew eyes. He introduced himself as a doctor, his stories of saving lives laced with just enough detail to convince. His blue eyes held a warmth that felt genuine, his laughter disarming. But John was a fabrication, a con man with a trail of victims stretching back decades. He'd served time for theft and fraud, his life a cycle of lies, manipulation, and predation. To Deborah, he was a soulmate, a man who listened, who shared her dreams. Their whirlwind romance moved fast, too fast, culminating in a Las Vegas wedding just weeks after meeting. But John's mask was already slipping. Deborah's daughters saw through him from the start. Jacqueline, 31, was fiercely protective, her instincts sharp. She noticed John's inconsistencies, his vague job details, his constant need for money, his refusal to let Deborah out of his sight. Tara, 25, was softer but equally wary, her unease growing as John inserted himself into their family. They dug into his past, their searches uncovering a chilling truth. John Meehan was no doctor. He was a convicted felon nicknamed Dirty John by former victims for his deceit. They confronted Deborah, begging her to leave, but love had blinded her. She dismissed their warnings, her trust in John unshaken, even as his behavior grew darker. John's control tightened. He moved into Deborah's penthouse, his presence a constant shadow. He monitored her phone, isolated her from friends, and siphoned money from her accounts, claiming it was for their future. Deborah, caught in his spell, rationalized his demands, her love a shield against doubt. But John's past was catching up. Former victims, alerted by his reappearance, sent warnings to Deborah's family. Court records revealed restraining orders, scams, and a history of targeting vulnerable women. Jacqueline and Tara escalated their efforts, hiring a private investigator who uncovered John's latest scheme. He was planning to drain Deborah's wealth and disappear. By 2015, Deborah's eyes began to open. Small clues, John's lies about his schedule, missing money, a hidden stash of documents chipped away at her trust. She confronted him, her voice trembling, and John's charm turned to menace. He threatened her, his words laced with a coldness she hadn't seen. Deborah, terrified but resolute, asked him to leave. John complied, but his departure was a ruse. He began stalking her, his obsession unrelenting. He hacked her emails, sent threatening messages, and lurked outside her home. Deborah obtained a restraining order, but John was undeterred, his predatory instincts fixed on her family. The turning point came in August 2016 when John targeted Tara. Tara, now living in Las Vegas, had distanced herself from the drama. Her life focused on work and her love for zombie shows like The Walking Dead. She was unaware of John's growing fixation, his belief that targeting her would hurt Deborah most. On August 20, John ambushed Tara in her apartment parking lot. He approached her, a knife glinting in his hand, his face a mask of intent. Tara fought back, her survival instincts kicking in. She screamed, kicking and clawing, her training from self-defense classes guiding her. In the struggle, the knife fell and Tara grabbed it, stabbing John 13 times in a desperate bid to survive. John collapsed, his life fading in the parking lot. Police arrived, their sirens cutting through the dusk. Tara was shaken, her hands bloodied, her story one of self-defense. John was rushed to a hospital but died from his wounds. His reign of terror ended. Investigators pieced together the scene. John's car held a kidnap kit, duct tape, ties, zip ties, sedatives, a chilling glimpse into his plans. Tara's actions were ruled self-defense, no charges filed, her courage a testament to her strength. But the victory was bittersweet, the trauma, a shadow that lingered. The investigation into John Meehan revealed a life of calculated deceit. Born in 1959, he'd begun scamming as a teenager, his crimes escalating from theft to fraud to stalking. He'd posed as a lawyer, a realtor, a doctor, each persona a tool to exploit. His victims, mostly women, spoke of his charm, his ability to make them feel chosen, only to leave them broken. Court records showed over 50 restraining orders, countless lawsuits and prison stints that never reformed him. John's death closed his chapter, but the damage he left was immeasurable. Deborah and her daughters faced a painful reckoning. Deborah, devastated by her blindness to John's nature, grappled with guilt. She spoke publicly, her story a warning about the power of manipulation, her design firm now a platform for advocacy. Jacqueline, vindicated but scarred, rebuilt her bond with her mother, their shared ordeal a bridge. Tara, hailed as a survivor, carried the weight of taking a life, her resilience tempered by nightmares. The family healed slowly, their love strained but enduring, a testament to their strength. Newport Beach, a city of polished facades, was shaken by the story. John Meehan's name became synonymous with deception, his tale immortalized in a podcast, Dirty John, and a TV series. They captivated millions. The case sparked conversations about coercive control, about the dangers of charm without substance. Deborah's penthouse, once a place of refuge, was sold, its new occupants unaware of the shadows it held. The ocean breeze still blew, but for those who knew the story, it carried a chill. The story of John Meehan and Deborah Newell is a haunting exploration of love's blind spots. John was a predator, his lies a weapon honed over decades, his charm a trap that ensnared even the strongest. Deborah's trust, her hope for love, was her vulnerability, but also her strength. She survived, her family intact, their bond a defiance of his legacy. Tara's courage, her fight in that parking lot, was a turning point, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, instinct can prevail. John's kidnap kit, his threatening messages, his false personas, they were the tools of a man who thrived on control, but they couldn't withstand the truth. As the night wraps around us, this story lingers, a cautionary tale of what happens when love meets deception, and a tribute to those who fight to reclaim their light. Chapter 6, The Betrayal of Jaimie Hahn. It was April 17, 2013, in a quiet suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, where the spring air carried the promise of renewal. In a modest home, filled with the warmth of friendship, 23-year-old Jaimie Hahn was hosting a dinner for those closest to her. Among them was Jonathan Brill, a man she trusted, a friend who shared her laughter and dreams. But beneath the surface of that evening, a secret simmered, a theft that would ignite a spark of greed and rage. By night's end, Jaimie's life would be stolen in a brutal act of betrayal, her blood staining the very place she felt safest, and a web of lies would unravel to reveal a monster hiding in plain sight. Jaimie Hahn was a beacon of light in a world that could feel heavy. At 23, she was a recent college graduate, her dark hair framing a face that radiated kindness and ambition. She was a dreamer, passionate about environmental science, with plans to pursue a career that would make a difference. Jaimie had grown up in Raleigh, her Korean-American family a pillar of support, her parents proud of her drive, her younger sister her confidant. She was the kind of friend who remembered birthdays, who listened without judgment, her laughter a melody that drew people close. In her small rental house, she built a community, her door always open to those she loved. But in trusting Jonathan Brill, she opened her door to danger. Jonathan Brill was 25, a man whose boyish charm masked a calculating heart. Tall and lean, with a quick smile and a knack for storytelling, he blended easily into Jaimie's circle. He worked odd jobs, his life a patchwork of ambition and instability. To Jaimie, he was a friend, someone who shared her love for late-night conversations and shared dreams. But Jonathan had a darker side, a history of petty theft, a penchant for manipulation, and a growing resentment toward those who had more. He was close to Jaimie's roommate, Nation Hahn, a 24-year-old software developer whose steady success contrasted with Jonathan's aimlessness. In their friendship, a seed of envy took root, one that would bear deadly fruit. The dinner that night was a gathering of friends, the table set with Jaimie's signature care-mismatched plates, candles flickering, the aroma of homemade food. Jaimie, Nation, Jonathan, and a few others laughed and talked, the evening a snapshot of youth and connection. But beneath the warmth, tension simmered. Weeks earlier, Jaimie had confided in Nation about a troubling discovery. $2,000, 0 cents, was missing from her savings, money she'd set aside for rent and tuition. She suspected Jonathan, who'd been alone in the house during a recent visit. Nation, loyal but cautious, urged her to confront him, but Jaimie hesitated, her trust in their friendship holding her back. That night she found her courage, and her words would set a tragedy in motion. As the dinner wound down, Jaimie pulled Jonathan aside, her voice steady but firm. She asked about the money, her eyes searching his for truth. Jonathan's face hardened, his charm replaced by defiance. He denied the theft, his voice rising, but Jaimie pressed, her certainty unshaken. The confrontation escalated, the others unaware, as the room grew heavy with anger. In a moment of rage, Jonathan snapped. He grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, its blade catching the candlelight. Before Jaimie could react, he lunged, stabbing her in the chest. She gasped, her hands clutching at the wound, but Jonathan struck again, the knife piercing her heart. Jaimie fell, her life slipping away on the kitchen floor. Her home, now a crime scene. Nation, hearing the commotion, rushed in, his shock freezing him in place. Jaimie lay motionless, her blood pooling beneath her, Jonathan standing over her, the knife still in his hand. Nation's scream broke the silence, the other guests running in, their horror echoing through the house. Jonathan dropped the knife, his face a mask of panic, and fled into the night, his car screeching down the street. A Nation called 911, his voice trembling as he cradled Jaimie, begging her to hold on, but she was gone, her light extinguished in a moment of senseless violence. Police arrived within minutes, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The scene was chaotic. Friends in tears, blood staining the floor, the knife a grim centerpiece. Jaimie's death was confirmed, her body a silent accusation. The investigation began immediately, the Raleigh Police Department mobilizing to find Jonathan Brill. Nation, devastated but resolute, gave a detailed account, his testimony naming Jonathan as the killer. Friends corroborated the story, recalling Jaimie's suspicions about the stolen money, the confrontation that ended in tragedy. The motive was clear, greed fueled by envy had turned a friend into a murderer. Jonathan's flight was short-lived. Police tracked his car to a motel 50 miles away, their SWAT team surrounding the building at dawn. Jonathan surrendered without resistance, his bravado gone, his hands shaking as he was cuffed. In interrogation, he spun a web of lies, claiming self-defense, saying Jaimie had attacked him first, but the evidence was damning. The knife bore his fingerprints, Jaimie's blood was on his clothes, and witnesses confirmed her calm demeanor before the attack. Most chilling was a discovery in his car, a notebook detailing his financial woes, his resentment toward Jaimie and Nation, and a cryptic note, "Take what's owed." The theft, it seemed, was just the beginning of his unraveling. The investigation uncovered a troubling pattern. Jonathan had a history of small scams, borrowing money he never repaid, manipulating those around him. Friends revealed his jealousy of Nation's success, his bitterness toward Jaimie's stability. The $2,000 0 cents theft was a desperate act, a way to bridge his debts. But Jaimie's confrontation threatened his fragile ego. Forensic evidence sealed his fate. Blood spatter showed Jaimie was standing, not attacking. When struck, her wounds defensive, her death deliberate. The case was airtight, a testament to the police's swift work and the clarity of witness accounts. The trial began in 2014, a somber affair in a city shaken by the loss of a beloved daughter. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case, Nation's testimony its heart. He spoke of Jaimie, of her kindness, her dreams, his voice breaking as he recounted finding her body, the knife, the notebook, the blood evidence. They painted a picture of premeditated rage. Jonathan's defense leaned on his claims of panic, alleging a mental breakdown, but the jury saw through it. His lies about fake illnesses, claims of cancer to gain sympathy, further eroded his credibility. In 2015, Jonathan Brill was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole, his fate sealed in a courtroom heavy with grief. Jaimie's family sat through every day, their pain a quiet force. Her parents spoke of their daughter, of her love for nature, her plans to change the world, their voices carrying the weight of a future stolen. Her sister, now a college student, clutched a photo of Jaimie, her tears a silent vow to carry her memory. Raleigh mourned with them, the community leaving flowers at Jaimie's house, a makeshift memorial to a life cut short. The case sparked discussions about trust, about the fragility of bonds, about the dangers lurking in those we call friends. Nation Han faced his own reckoning. His testimony had brought justice, but the guilt of surviving, of not stopping the tragedy, haunted him. He left Raleigh seeking solace in a new city, his life forever marked by that night. Jaimie's house was sold, its new occupants unaware of the tragedy within. But for those who knew her, it remained a place of light dimmed too soon. The story of Jaimie Han became a local legend, a cautionary tale of betrayal, its echoes felt in every quiet suburb. This story is a haunting reminder of trust's fragility. Jaimie Han opened her home, her heart to a friend, unaware of the envy that festered within him. Jonathan Brill's greed, his need to take what wasn't his, turned a moment of honesty into a tragedy. The knife, the notebook, the stolen money. They were fragments of a truth that refused to stay buried. Jaimie's life was more than her death. She was a daughter, a sister, a dreamer whose legacy endures in those who loved her. As the night deepens, her story lingers, a testament to the strength of community, the pursuit of justice, and the enduring pain of betrayal. In the end, it asks us, who do we trust and at what cost? Chapter 7, The Grandmother's Deadly Discipline. It was May 12, 2012, in a quiet condominium complex in Clinton Township, Michigan, where the spring evenings carried a gentle calm. Inside one tidy unit, 65-year-old Sandra Lane was raising her 17-year-old grandson, Jonathan Hoffman, a teenager with dreams of college and a future beyond his troubled past. Sandra was a devoted grandmother, her life centered on family, her home a sanctuary of order. But beneath the surface, a storm of frustration and control was brewing. That afternoon, a heated argument spiraled into violence, and the crack of gunfire silenced Jonathan's voice forever. Sandra claimed she feared for her life, but the truth behind her deadly discipline would reveal a tragedy of misjudgment and loss. Jonathan Hoffman was a young man caught between promise and pain. At 17, he was tall and lanky, his dark eyes holding a mix of defiance and hope. He'd grown up in Michigan, his early years marked by his parents' bitter divorce, a custody battle that left him adrift. His mother, Jennifer, struggled with addiction, and his father, Michael, lived out of state, leaving Jonathan in the care of his paternal grandparents, Sandra and Fred Lane. Jonathan was bright, with a sharp wit and a passion for music, dreaming of studying engineering. But he was also a teenager, prone to rebellion, his experimentation with marijuana a point of contention. To Sandra, he was both her pride and her challenge, a boy she loved but felt compelled to control. Sandra Lane was 65, a petite woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. A former school teacher, she valued discipline, her home a reflection of her need for order, neatly arranged furniture, schedules strictly kept. She and Fred had taken Jonathan in 2 years earlier, determined to give him stability. Sandra was fiercely protective, her love for Jonathan undeniable, but her parenting style was rigid, her patience worn thin by his defiance. Fred, a lawyer, was often away, leaving Sandra to manage Jonathan's teenage struggles alone. The condo, once a place of warmth, had become a battleground. Their arguments escalating over rules, grades, and Jonathan's drug use. That May afternoon, the tension reached a breaking point. Jonathan had been grounded, his phone privileges revoked after Sandra found marijuana in his room. He was restless, his frustration bubbling over, his dreams of freedom clashing with Sandra's rules. The argument began over a small infraction, Jonathan sneaking out to meet friends, but it quickly spiraled. Sandra's voice was sharp, her words laced with disappointment. Jonathan's was loud, his anger a rebellion against her control. What happened next remains contested, but the outcome was undeniable. Sandra retrieved a .40 caliber Glock from a locked safe, a gun she'd purchased months earlier for self-defense. In the condo's living room, the situation exploded. Sandra later claimed Jonathan was out of control, his size and anger intimidating, his threats making her fear for her life. She said he lunged at her, his fists raised, and she fired in panic. But the evidence told a different story. Jonathan was shot 6 times, twice in the chest, once in the abdomen, 3 times in the back, as he tried to flee. The bullets tore through him, his body collapsing near the front door, his phone still clutched in his hand, a 911 call half-dialed. Sandra stood over him, the gun trembling, her world unraveling as the reality of her actions sank in. Neighbors, alerted by the gunfire, called police, their voices frantic. Clinton Township officers arrived, their boots echoing in the quiet complex. The scene was devastating. Jonathan's body lay in a pool of blood, Sandra sitting nearby, her face blank, the Glock on the coffee table. She was calm, almost detached, telling officers she'd acted in self-defense, that Jonathan had attacked her, that she had no choice. Paramedics confirmed Jonathan's death, his dreams silenced at 17. Sandra was arrested, her hands cuffed as neighbors watched in disbelief, the condo's tidy facade shattered by tragedy. The investigation moved swiftly, the Macomb County Sheriff's Office piecing together the moments before the shooting. The condo was a crime scene, its walls marked by bullet holes, blood spatter tracing Jonathan's desperate attempt to escape. The Glock, legally purchased by Sandra, held her fingerprints, its magazine nearly empty. Ballistic evidence showed the shots were fired at close range, the angle suggesting Jonathan was turning away, not advancing. His body bore no signs of a struggle, no bruises, no defensive wounds, contradicting Sandra's claim of an attack. The half-dialed 911 call was a heartbreaking detail, a boy's final plea for help cut short. Investigators interviewed family and friends, their accounts painting a complex picture. Jonathan's mother, Jennifer, spoke of his struggles but insisted he was never violent, his defiance typical of a teenager. His father, Michael, was devastated, blaming Sandra's strictness for escalating tensions. Friends described Jonathan as troubled but kind, his drug use a minor rebellion, not a sign of aggression. Neighbors noted Sandra's frustration, her complaints about Jonathan's behavior, a constant refrain. Fred Lane, Sandra's husband, was shocked, admitting the gun was a precaution against home invasions, not family. The picture that emerged was one of a grandmother overwhelmed, her love for Jonathan tangled with a need for control. Sandra's claim of self-defense was scrutinized. At 65, she was frail compared to Jonathan's 6-foot frame, but her actions suggested intent. Months earlier, she'd taken shooting lessons, her proficiency with the Glock evident in the precision of the shots. A search of the condo revealed a journal, its pages filled with Sandra's fears about Jonathan's drug use, her belief that he was spiraling, her resolve to save him. The journal stopped short of admitting intent, but it hinted at a woman at her breaking point, her discipline crossing into obsession. The prosecution argued she'd snapped, her fear of losing control driving her to a deadly act. The trial began in 2013, a wrenching affair in a community grappling with the loss of a young life. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case, the ballistic evidence at its core. They showed the bullet trajectories, the shots to Jonathan's back, the lack of physical evidence supporting an attack. The 911 call, though incomplete, was played, its static a haunting echo of Jonathan's final moments. Witnesses, including Jonathan's teachers, spoke of his potential, his struggles, a cry for guidance, not violence. The defense leaned on Sandra's fear, painting Jonathan as a troubled teen whose size and anger overwhelmed her. Sandra took the stand, her voice soft, her tears genuine, but her story faltered under cross-examination, her claim of imminent danger unconvincing. The jury deliberated for days, their task heavy with nuance. Sandra's love for Jonathan was undeniable, but so was her responsibility. In 2013, Sandra Lane was convicted of second-degree murder and a firearms charge, a compromise reflecting the complexity of her motives. She was sentenced to 20 years, her life now confined to a cell, her family fractured. Jonathan's parents sat in the courtroom, their grief a quiet storm, their loss a wound that time could not heal. Sandra's husband, Fred, stood by her, his loyalty a testament to their bond, but even he struggled with the truth of her actions. Clinton Township mourned Jonathan, a makeshift memorial of flowers and candles appearing outside the condo. His friends held a vigil, sharing stories of his music, his dreams, their voices carrying his memory into the night. The case sparked debates about guardianship, about the pressures of raising troubled teens, about the dangers of guns and volatile homes. The condo was sold, its new occupants unaware of the tragedy, but for those who knew Jonathan, it remained a place of unfulfilled promise. Sandra's sentence, while just, offered little solace to a community questioning how love could turn so deadly. The story of Jonathan Hoffman and Sandra Lane is a heartbreaking exploration of control and its consequences. Sandra's need for discipline, her belief that she could mold Jonathan, blinded her to his humanity. His struggles a mirror of her own failures. Jonathan, a boy on the cusp of manhood, was caught in a web of expectations. His rebellion a cry for freedom that went unheard. The Glock, the bullet holes, the half-dialed call, they were fragments of a tragedy that could have been avoided. A moment where understanding might have prevailed over fear. As the night deepens, this story lingers. A reminder that love, when tangled with control, can become a weapon, and that the loss of a young life leaves shadows that never fade. Chapter 8, The Tragedy of Paula Salazar. It was March 23, 2020, in a remote farming community in Ecuador's Manabi province, where the fields stretched under an endless sky and life moved to the rhythm of the harvest. In a modest home surrounded by banana groves, 4-year-old Paula Salazar lived with her mother, Andrina Chila, and her stepfather, Andreas Vera. Paula was a bright spark, her laughter a melody that echoed through the dusty paths. But behind the walls of that home, a darkness festered, cruelty cloaked in discipline, indifference masked as care. When Paula's cries were silenced forever, her father's relentless fight for justice would expose a harrowing truth, revealing the failures that let a child slip through the cracks. Paula Salazar was a child who radiated joy despite her hardships. At 4, she was small for her age, her dark eyes wide with curiosity, her smile a gift to those who knew her. She loved chasing chickens in the yard, her tiny hands clutching wildflowers, her voice singing songs she'd learned from her grandmother. Paula's parents, Leonardo Salazar and Andrina Chila, had separated when she was a baby, their relationship strained by poverty and distance. Leonardo, a construction worker, lived in a nearby town, visiting Paula when he could, his love for her fierce despite their time apart. Andrina, 24, had custody, raising Paula in the rural home she shared with Andreas Vera, her 26-year-old partner. To the community, they were a quiet family, but Paula's world was far from safe. Andrina Chila was a young mother overwhelmed by life's demands. Raised in poverty, she was reserved, her emotions guarded, her focus on survival. She worked the fields alongside Andreas her days long, her patience thin. Andreas, a farmhand with a temper, was a domineering presence, his authority unquestioned in their home. Together, they viewed Paula's childish energy as a burden, her tantrums a challenge to their control. Neighbors later recalled hearing Paula's cries, her small voice pleading, but dismissed it as typical discipline. In that isolated community where privacy was sacred, no one intervened until it was too late. But the tragedy unfolded over months, a slow descent into cruelty. Paula, like any 4-year-old, was spirited, her curiosity often testing boundaries. Andrina and Andreas, frustrated by her behavior, resorted to harsh punishments, locking her in a closet, withholding food, striking her with belts or sticks. What they called discipline was abuse, each act leaving marks on Paula's body and spirit. Medical records later revealed a history of unexplained bruises, visits to a local clinic where Andrina's excuses false, accidents went unquestioned. Paula's weight dropped, her laughter faded, but the community, bound by custom, turned a blind eye. On March 23, 2020, the abuse reached its breaking point. The details are harrowing, pieced together from confessions and forensic evidence. Paula had spilled water, a small act that enraged Andreas. He grabbed her, shaking her violently, his hands leaving bruises on her arms. Andrina, instead of protecting her daughter, joined in, striking Paula with a wooden spoon. The punishment escalated, their anger a storm that overwhelmed the child. Paula's body, already weakened by malnutrition, couldn't withstand the assault. She collapsed, her breathing shallow, her heart failing. Andrina and Andreas, realizing the severity, panicked but did not call for help. They hid her body in a sack, burying it in a shallow grave behind the house, believing the remote farm would keep their secret. Leonardo Salazar, Paula's father, sensed something was wrong when Andrina stopped answering his calls. He'd last seen Paula a month earlier, her thin frame and quiet demeanor worrying him. On March 25, he traveled to the farm, his heart heavy with dread. Andrina claimed Paula was with a relative, her story vague, her eyes avoiding his. Leonardo's instincts screamed otherwise. He contacted local police, his voice breaking as he demanded a search. The community, stirred by his desperation, began to whisper, their silence breaking as guilt took hold. On March 27, police arrived, their presence a disruption in the quiet fields. The search was grim, the air thick with tension. Officers questioned Andrina and Andreas, their alibis crumbling under scrutiny. A neighbor, emboldened by Leonardo's pleas, mentioned seeing Andreas digging near the house at night. Police focused on the backyard, their shovels uncovering a shallow grave within hours. Paula's body, wrapped in a sack, was a heartbreaking sight. Her small frame battered, her face frozen in pain. The autopsy revealed the truth: blunt force trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding, and signs of chronic abuse. Paula had died from a combination of injuries and neglect, her final moments a testament to the cruelty she'd endured. Andrina and Andreas were arrested, their denials sharp but fleeting. In interrogation, they turned on each other, each blaming the other for the fatal blows. Andrina admitted to disciplining Paula, claiming she never meant to kill her, her tears a mix of regret and self-preservation. Andreas confessed to the shaking, insisting it was a moment of anger, not intent. Their confessions, though partial, were damning, corroborated by forensic evidence. Paula's DNA on a wooden spoon, bruises matching Andreas's grip. The grave, the sack, the hidden abuse. They painted a picture of deliberate cruelty, not a tragic accident. The investigation exposed the community's failure. Neighbors admitted ignoring Paula's cries, their reluctance rooted in cultural norms that prioritize family privacy. The clinic's staff faced scrutiny for accepting Andrina's excuses, their inaction a missed chance to save Paula. Leonardo's anguish fueled a broader reckoning, his demands for accountability sparking protests in Manabi. He became a voice for child welfare, his campaign drawing national attention, his grief a call to action. The case highlighted systemic gaps, underfunded social services, untrained rural clinics, a culture that normalized harsh discipline. The trial began in 2021, a somber affair in a region unaccustomed to such scrutiny. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case, the autopsy at its heart. Photos of Paula's injuries, too graphic for public release, silenced the courtroom, her suffering undeniable. Leonardo testified, his voice steady as he spoke of his daughter's light, his guilt for not protecting her, a wound that would never heal. Neighbors, shamed into honesty, admitted hearing Paula's cries, their silence a collective burden. The defense argued diminished responsibility, citing Andrina and Andreas' poverty and stress, but the jury saw intent in their actions, their cover-up a clear sign of guilt. In 2022, Andrina Chila and Andreas Vera were convicted of aggravated murder and concealment of a body. Each received 17 years, a sentence that felt both just and insufficient. A controversial ruling allowed Andrina to serve her term under house arrest, citing her status as a mother to a newborn, a decision that sparked outrage among Leonardo's supporters. Andreas was sent to a maximum security prison, his fate a stark contrast to Andrina's leniency. The verdict closed the case but opened wounds, the community grappling with its role in Paula's death, Leonardo vowing to fight for stronger child protections. Manabi mourned Paula, her story a scar on the region's conscience. Leonardo created a foundation in her name, funding education and advocacy to prevent other tragedies. The farm where Paula died was abandoned, its fields left fallow, a silent testament to loss. The community, once insular, began to change. Neighbors forming watch groups, clinics adopting stricter protocols. Paula's wildflowers, once clutched in her hands, became a symbol planted in gardens across Manabi. their colors a tribute to a child who deserved better. The tragedy of Paula Salazar is a searing reminder of the innocence we failed to protect. Andrina and Andreas, bound by their own struggles, saw a child's spirit as a burden, their discipline a mask for cruelty. Paula's cries, ignored by those who could have helped, echo as a call to listen, to act. The shallow grave, the wooden spoon, the bruises, they were fragments of a truth that demanded to be seen. Leonardo's fight, his love for his daughter, turned grief into change, but at a cost no parent should bear. As the night deepens, Paula's story lingers, a plea for vigilance, a testament to a child's light, and a question that haunts us. How many more must fall before we learn to save them? As the night grows still, the stories remain, echoes of lives lost, truths uncovered, and justice sought in the darkness. These are the shadows of the past, reminding us that even in quiet places, evil can linger. Yet so can hope, relentless in its pursuit of truth. Thank you for joining us. If these tales have stirred you, leave a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. Until next time, sleep well, but keep the light close. Good night.